Hello there, my name is Amanda May and welcome back to my channel. Today I thought I'd do a November wrap-up. Even though I'm a little late, I didn't have a booktube channel in November, so might as well do it now. I want to talk about those books anyway. So I don't read a whole lot of manga since most of them are animes and I generally watch the anime, but I came across an anime called Orange and it sounded so interesting that I actually stopped watching the anime so that I could go pick up the manga. So here's the Orange series. It comes in 2 volumes and a separate bonus story. I actually read the first volume in October, but I finished volumes 2 and number 3 in November. But to avoid spoilers, let's talk about the first one. So this story follows our main character Naho and a group of high school friends. The story begins with Naho receiving a letter from herself 10 years in the future. At first she doesn't think it's real, but then events that are written in the letter start actually happening and she has to take the letter more seriously. Her future self begs Naho to watch over one of her classmates, Kakaru, and save him from a horrible future. Kakaru is a new student and so doesn't have very many friends, but quickly gets enveloped in Naho's group of friends. Oh, by the way, the author is Ichigo Takano, and he is also the artist. Not only did I really enjoy the storyline, but I also really like the art style. The glare, which is really important for me when it comes to anime and manga. I really enjoyed this story, but I do want to communicate a trigger warning for suicide and depression. But if you're okay reading about those, I highly recommend this manga. Next up, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This book kind of took booktube by storm in October when it came out, and I was definitely on that train. This is the Alcrate exclusive edition, and I love it. I wasn't super blown away at first, but the back got me. Look at that. You got your iconic quote, "Never pray to the gods who answer after dark." Love the geometric design of that too. So I read this relatively quickly, which I feel like was a really good thing because the first, 100 to 200 pages were pretty slow. The whole idea is that Addie LaRue is being forced into a marriage that she doesn't want, and in order to get out of it, she prays to a God that answers after dark and is cursed to live forever but be forgotten by everyone she meets, until she goes to a bookshop and meets a guy who actually remembers her name. Now, that part of the book where she meets the guy who actually remembers her name doesn't happen for a while. So that's why I say that the beginning of this book was kind of slow for me, even though it was still interesting. Victoria Schwab did a really good job realizing this curse. There were a lot of things about it that I just wouldn't have thought of, and it was very clear that she put a lot of thought into it. So that kind of sustained me through the first 150 pages. Once we meet the other character who remembers her name, the story picks up more and I was gripped until the end, to be honest. And throughout the book, I wasn't really sure how she was going to end it, how she was going to resolve the conflicts, but I actually kind of like how it worked out. So if that synopsis sounds at all interesting to you and you haven't already read this book, I highly encourage you to pick it up. The next book I read was The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. I grew up watching the animated movie for this and I loved it, and I didn't actually know that it was originally a book until relatively recently. And not only did this have the nostalgia factor for me, but the blurb was written by Patrick Rothfuss, who, if you don't know, is my all-time favorite author. This is what he had to say about it. "The Last Unicorn is the best book I have ever read. You need to read it. If you've already read it, you need to read it again." Hello. It's nostalgic, and my favorite author is gonna write something that passionate about it. I had to read this book. And I'm really glad that I picked it up because I found the writing style to be really beautiful and the storyline was actually really similar to the movie. There were a few things that the book had the movie didn't, and it makes me appreciate the story a bit more because it fleshes out a bit more of the storyline. I also could really tell that Patrick Rothfuss was influenced by this author because their writing styles are rather similar, and obviously I really love Patrick Rothfuss's writing style, so I felt right at home reading this. It is kind of more classical in nature, so if you've read Lord of the Rings, you kind of know how classic fantasy can sometimes differ in writing style from our current fantasy, but I honestly didn't see that as a negative. But if you have a hard time reading classical fantasy, you might consider that before picking up this book. The next book I read was Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. This is the sequel to Strange the Dreamer, which I read in October. And I really enjoyed Strange the Dreamer, so I had really high hopes for this, and I was not disappointed. The first thing that caught me about Strange the Dreamer was in the preface, the intro. I really loved her writing style, which is a little bit on the flowery side. And I also really loved how impactful the events are of the preface. And no spoilers, so I'm not going to tell you why, you're just going to have to read it. But in the sequel, we get a few new characters or more insights. One of the worst things about filming on your phone is that people try and call and text you, and it interrupts your recording. I'm talking to you, husband. So where were we? Oh yes. So I really liked getting to delve deeper into some of the other characters, especially one of the other characters, which I'm not going to say who it is, because that would be spoilery, but I will say it's a character that you kind of love to hate, or maybe you just hate. It's a character that I really did not like in Strange the Dreamer. This character was awful. Not written poorly, just drove me insane. But we got to delve a little deeper into this character, and I actually ended up liking this person. So this sequel did a good job at changing my mind on a character that I previously hated. Also, the ending. It takes such a turn that I honestly didn't see coming. I just didn't see it coming. I don't really try and guess the endings of books, so maybe somebody else would be able to see it coming. I didn't try and guess it, and I didn't guess it. I didn't even come close to guessing it. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I definitely recommend it to anybody who is a fan of Laini Taylor or who's read Strange the Dreamer but for some reason hasn't picked this up yet. You should do it. You should get on that. The next book I read was An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson, and I definitely got this as a recommendation from BookTube. I otherwise probably wouldn't have picked this book up. I wouldn't have maybe even known it existed, but I'm really glad that I did pick this book up because it was just the perfect short little fall read. It was described as a cute, kind of fluffy love story, and I think that description was a good one. So in this story, we follow our main character, Isabel, who is human and who is kind of a prodigy when it comes to painting. And our other character, Rook, is Fae, but not the Sarah J. Maas kind of Fae. These Fae are a little bit more mischievous. They are beautiful on the outside, but they're not actually beautiful. I don't know how to explain that. But the main premise is that Fae can't create art or craft is what it's called. They can't do anything crafty. So they wouldn't be able to paint, for instance. That is how our main character gets by, is she paints portraits for the Fae and then they pay her with magic spells, essentially. Until she is commissioned to do a portrait of Rook, our other main character, and she ends up painting a human emotion in his eyes in the portrait. And Fae do not have human emotions the same way that humans do, and it's seen as a weakness, and so it's really not a good thing that she painted a human emotion on Rook's face in the painting. This causes a lot of drama. Rook comes and whisks her away into the Fae realm to pay for her crime. And like I said, I really enjoyed it. If you're looking for kind of a sweet, shorter fantasy romance book, I definitely recommend picking this up. The next book I read was Mistborn, or The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. So, before I got on BookTube, my exposure to Brandon Sanderson was people saying that he is wordy and his books are slow or just not exciting enough. But then BookTube came into my life, and there are so many Brandon Sanderson fans on BookTube, and they convinced me to read Mistborn. And I'm so glad that they did, because this book is so good. And I really didn't think that Brandon Sanderson's writing style was a problem. He didn't seem wordy to me. I was gripped from the beginning, and I really felt that his writing style was very approachable, very easy to follow, easy to read quickly, and really I didn't have any problem with it. So Mistborn, if you don't already know, has a really unique magic system in which certain people are able to digest certain metals, and each different metal gives you some different ability. The majority of the people who are able to do this can only burn. When you're using it, it's called burning the metal. They can only burn one type of metal, except there are people called Mistborn who can burn all of the metals, and they're very rare, and our main character is a Mistborn. So if you aren't familiar with the Mistborn story, the main premise is that way back when, there was a hero of prophecy that went on a quest to defeat this dark evil power, except, surprise, he failed. So for the past 1,000 years, the entire world has been ruled by a not so great person. And our character, along with a band of thieves, her found family, if you like that trope, set out to overthrow this evil lord ruler. Anyway, I was expecting to really like this based off of what I've heard on BookTube, but I was not expecting to love this as much as I did. It is so good. I cannot sing its praises enough. It is wonderful, and if you have not read it, what are you doing? Please pick this up. It is great. You will thank yourself later. The last book I read in November is The Toll. I actually listened to the audiobook. I didn't read the physical book. This is the third book in the Arc of a Scythe trilogy by Neil Shusterman, and it is so good. I had a lot of great books in November, if you can't tell. It was a great reading month for me. But The Toll was one of my favorites, and to avoid spoilers, I will just tell you about Scythe right here. Here it is, right here. Scythe takes place on Earth a bunch of years in the future, where what we know of as the Cloud has evolved into the Thunderhead, which is this all-knowing AI. And through the Thunderhead, the human race has defeated disease, climate change, and even death. So people essentially live forever unless they are gleaned by scythes. Scythes are human, and it is their job to glean a certain number of people every year to kill them in order to keep the population count under control, because all attempts to leave Earth and colonize the universe have failed. So they're still stuck on Earth, and overpopulation is a concern, so we have scythes. In the first book, we have Citra Terranova and Rowan Damish, who are enlisted as scythe apprentices, but neither of them want the job, which turns out makes them perfect for the job, because a good scythe is somebody who doesn't want to kill. I found that this trilogy delved into a lot of interesting philosophical concepts and made me think really hard about what the future could be like and the potential problems that will come about as a result of technological advances. And that was one of my favorite things about the series, is just the thought-provoking concepts that are in it. But also there are a bunch of twists, and it's a wild ride, and you really get to love the characters. I think Neil Shusterman did a really good job fleshing out the world and all of the screwed up aspects of it. And so if you haven't read Scythe and the whole futuristic sci-fi aspect of this appeals to you, I highly recommend that you pick it up, and I highly recommend the audiobook. The narrator is wonderful. And that's it. That's all of the books that I read in the month of November. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more of my content, please subscribe. It really helps. And if you feel so inclined, please leave a comment down below about any of the books that you've read recently and what you thought of them. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!